Yes, ready? I hereby call this committee of the whole meeting to order. This evening on the agenda, we have 3 items: child care at council meetings, civic clerk discussion, and copying costs for council. So the first item, I will turn it over to Mrs. Hoover.
All right, the 3 big C's. Okay, so childcare, this is something that a resident brought up. I'm curious if anyone else has had conversations with people where they feel like childcare was an impediment to them attending council, if this is something that we wanted to look into. One of the thoughts that I had was if the idea of us having a standing child care provider seemed a little prohibitive, but if someone wanted to come, if they wanted to reach out to council ahead of time, then we could arrange for childcare. I wanted to see what people thought about that as an idea, if this is worth pursuing.
I think from my perspective, this seems like a good way to make sure that there's one less impediment to people participating if they want to. And just off the top of my head, I know a number of local folks that would be able to provide childcare potentially. So I think it's something worth pursuing. Maybe just if we could make a list of local folks that I'm sure we have people who have used them for childcare in the past, and have that just be a thing that say, hey, if you do need childcare, reach out to us and we can arrange something for you for however much time you need. So at least it seems like, that would be not too much money and not too much hassle, really.
Well, and discussing money-wise too, where it comes, if it's city budget or saying, hey, you can bring your kids, we have someone there, but it might be $2 to $5. I mean, that could even be an option too.
Or you find people who are willing to donate their time to the...
To the cause.
Yeah.
Especially if it's a relatively short amount of time. Hypothetically, most people probably wouldn't be attending the entire meeting. Maybe they just need to come and talk about a particular issue, or they want to hear something with with their zoning stuff that they had been worried about. So that could be something that, it seems like it would be pretty easy and pretty cheap way to make sure that's just something people can not worry about.
So we should continue to look into it, or start to look into it?
Yeah, I think it'd be good as an option if people know we could have that, and that is why they can't come.
Yeah.
I think that would be great.
Okay, I will start looking into that. I do love the idea of either a pay what you can or a volunteer. I also, as a former mother of small children, understand the challenges of planning ahead of time, but I feel like I would hate to have someone on call every single meeting. So if we could have 48-hour notice.
Yeah, I think 48-hour
something.
notice would be good. And I can start thinking of people that babysit some of my neighbors' kids, or that are in the area that would be, relatively easy to get over here in 48 hours.
How do we want, or who wants to be in charge of, that person, are they just going to call somebody on that list in hopes that they're able to watch the child, or are you thinking a centralized, one member of council, reach out to somebody and do it? How do you see that working logistically?
I hadn't honestly thought about it until this meeting, because if we put it on the agenda and then it went out of my head again. Maybe in my fantasy, that would be something that the clerk could do. I don't know if that's something that would be too much to put on their plate or not. Or not the clerk, I'm sorry, the council secretary.
Yes.
Since they would be in the office, and maybe have a list of people, and they could go through the list and,
Contact them.
I guess that would be my vision.
think that makes sense. I also just received word from Alexis that she's on her way. So
Awesome.
She will be joining us.
I mean, we
here in
could
a
just
little
line it up to, sorry, Emily.
Sorry.
We could just line it up with when everything has to be in for the agenda,
Oh, yeah, good
you
point,
know,
which
like
is.
the Friday at noon. So by Friday at noon, before a council meeting,
People might not know that they want to speak
yeah.
at
Oh,
the
because they
meeting
wouldn't
before
have
they
had the
get the,
agenda.
before the sunshine list goes out.
Oh, okay, so maybe.
So,
might-
yeah, it might need
next
to be
day.
Monday or something,
Monday.
just,
That's a good point.
yeah.
I think it'd be great too for future council individuals who want to run, but worry about, I don't have childcare
Right.
to handle that. So I
Right.
think that kind of opens that avenue as well.
So maybe 48 hours is not gonna work, maybe we need more like 20, like Monday at noon
Monday
or
before
something.
noon.
Okay. All right, well, let's start, if you guys just want to start shooting me child care provider names, and I'll put this on my to-do list.
Okay, anyone else? Then we'll move on to the second item. Mrs. Hoover, I think you wanted to talk about civic clerk.
So this was something that I believe we all got an email about from a gentleman who watches the meetings from home. And he was noticing that we were always talking about, oh, well, we need to share that. And he was saying on civic, well, I guess through our website, so would it be through Civic Plus, or would it be through the web, through the city government website, that we could utilize tabs and put documents on there?
So you want to add attachments to?
Right.
Okay.
Am I,
Yeah.
can someone else articulate that better?
And I believe there is a possibility there from what we got back from Mr. Powers and the secretary and also Mr. Gears. It's just figuring out what that process needs to be and who's in charge of it. But I think it is a possibility. And you can access it through the city website to get on to Civic Clerk. So there's both avenues. But I think they just, from that email was, they have to set up a process and figure out who's in charge of what. And that's one thing I was asking too, like when we scheduled last economic meeting, I really wanted specific attachments attached to that email just with the agenda. So even the sunshine list, like if they get the agenda, then they have the attachments that we're getting as well. Because I know we're trying to start to become more paperless. So typically we have those PDFs, that documentation. So if it's on the agenda, we have that documentation. Adding it to that sunshine list too is another avenue. But yeah, I think that was kind of stalled on.
So is there a way we can uninstall it?
I think we'd have to talk to the secretary clerk, Mr. Gears, and Mr. Powers to kind of see managerial-wise where that lies, administration-wise too. But I thought like a quick thing was like with the sunshine list, attaching those PDFs to that. So you definitely, sign up for this list, you'll get the information that we're looking at during a meeting. If it's provided before.
Okay. So, I guess we just need to reach out to them and see where it is in the process.
Yeah, that was the last I heard.
Does that sound like something that other people would be interested in, or
Yeah, I
think
think
would be
it-
helpful?
I think it would definitely be helpful if we're trying to share stuff like surveys that we want people to take and
Right.
Yeah.
the results of said surveys. I want to make sure it's not just me posting or the city posting on Facebook or, some social media site that not everyone uses or wants to use.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, it should be easy to categorize that.
yeah,
This is what, in the housing meeting right now, this is what's in economic, this is,
and here's
so-
who to contact if you want more information about a certain thing. Like,
Yeah.
here's the chair of these committee meetings. committees at this point. So.
Yeah.
Okay. I can shoot Noah an email and see where that lays, where that stands.
Okay, so you're gonna communicate with Mr. Powers
Yeah,
regarding that?
Mr. Powers.
Okay,
I'm gonna do that.
all right, thank you, Susan. And then, is that anything else on that topic? Then we'll move on.
So,
You don't think so? Okay. Then we'll move on to item 3, copying costs for council. You had brought that up, Mrs. Hoover.
right, so when I was doing the copies for the Hispanic festival, this Hispanic Heritage Festival, that was, I think, one of the, council hadn't done that quantity of copies in a long time. It was over 100 copies, and it was color copies, which we wanted because we wanted it to be bright and visual. And there was some confusion about, can we just print those? Do we have the budget for that? And I want us all to be on the same page. If we're making those sorts of quantities of copies, are we all comfortable with that? Do we have the budget for that? So what I ended up having to do for one of them, because Norcom couldn't print them, is I had them printed by someone else. And then I think I then got reimbursed later because we just weren't sure. And then I also, like out of my own pocket, which again, not a big deal, but I just want us to figure out, I paid to have one of those banners that says, the city of Cincinnati for when we do the off-pike markets or when we do any community events, that we can have sort of a presence. So how do we want to organize that? How do we want to make sure that we're all in agreement? Like if Alexis is doing a housing summit and she wants to make 200 copies, and I'm like, well, I don't think that that's worth it. I mean, I would, but, you know, like, how are we all going to be in agreement about the copies that we're making and the quantity, and that we're not over copying, but we're also making sure that we get the information that we need to get to our residents are getting out. So it's sort of like, how do we manage all that stuff? And right now, when I was trying to have copies made, I was running into problems. I couldn't get the copies made.
Yeah, I think because city council has its own fund within finance, my thinking would be that we need to account for that kind of thing would come out of that fund. And what we would have to do is make sure that we're requesting enough dollars every year to account for what that might be. Maybe it's a kind of thing where we say, you know, how many copies did we need to make last year? It was 400, so, you know, we need the money to make 500 copies every year, or something like that, just so that it's in our budget. That, to me, it's like, if it's considered an expense of what council would be doing, then it would come out of council's budget. Now, if you think there's a question that we all might not agree that it's a council expense, then I'd say that it's probably not a council expense. So if, like, and I'm just throwing out there just for discussion, but council didn't put on the Hispanic Heritage thing. So it wasn't a council event, it wasn't a sanctioned council event, it was its own thing. So I could see where, I don't have a problem, but somebody might have a problem using council funds or city funds in general to sponsor a non-city event. And my thinking is, if it's something like that, then it probably should go for a vote of some kind, you know?
Yeah, so should we have that be a policy, that if it's something like that, that it comes before council?
I don't know, at that, I don't know if it'd have to be a resolution or something, or it's, I'm not sure, because it might, I don't know, it might be worth a conversation with Mr. Powers about how the city in general would handle that. Like if the city were sponsoring an event, or not sponsoring an event, there was an event happening and the city wanted to put out flyers for that, where would that money come from? I don't know the answer to that. But it seems like it's a little dicey to be using copies to promote things that we're interested in.
Right, that's
Yeah, I
why,
think that-
that's exactly why I brought it.
Yeah.
For this very reason.
So that's just,
But I think it's good for like, if it's a committee meeting and we're having like an education and it comes out of the housing committee, like, hey, this is, the city's offering you education for this, or we're doing a discussion, town hall meeting. Like
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe having a set
'Cause
budget for
That's
that.
council business.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And saying, yeah, we have this amount to hit every year.
Yeah, I think setting a hard limit of like something reasonable based on the past year or two of what we've had to print out. And that way, if it comes up to that limit and we still need something, that could be something we could make sure we're not overloading the copy
Right.
machine with stuff.
You can also do, each member is allowed a certain number of copies, like immediate council business copies,
Right. Yeah.
not just copying an agenda or something, but.
Yeah, it'd be good to follow up with Mr. Powers and see what the city's rules and regulations are about that, and maybe just copy them.
It could be. The other issue is we're probably, I think we're past time to we put in our request for budget for next year, aren't we?
I think so.
Yeah, so. We're a little, it would, I mean, I know that there's probably some wiggle room in our budget, but it would be something we'd want to definitely figure in for the next time around.
Okay. All right, well, I will talk to Bill about that then, too. So specifically, okay, so for clarity, if it's something specifically coming out of the housing committee for a housing thing, that makes sense. If it's something that's a little more nebulous, then it will probably need to come to the committee for a vote, or maybe it needs to go somewhere else.
Right.
We can follow up probably with Keith or Tim on that and see exactly what
Yeah.
we need to do.
Okay. I'm just trying
Like,
to
for instance,
articulate.
the city will use its time to hang banners for other events. That's, even though it might not be a hard cost, it's a labor cost because
Right.
it takes time away from other things. So
Right.
I know that we do account for that somehow, I just don't know how.
Anyone else? So you know how you're moving forward with that, Mrs. Hoover?
Yes, I'm just making notes so I can recall what I'm
Okay.
asking you. When I'm talking to him. Thank you
Okay.
very much.
All right. Anything else? Anyone else on that topic? Mrs.
Oh,
Franklin?
not on that topic.
Okay.
Never mind. This is just a question I'll ask. It's a rules question about committee of the whole stuff, but I will ask you that after we're done out of the committee of the whole. Sorry.
Well, good. Well, then that concludes all three items that we're talking about. Just for the record, Mrs. Franson, Mrs. Hoover, Ms. Royce, Mr. Thompson, and Mrs. Winterbauer are all here, so we have 5 members present. And since we've wrapped it up, so we'll go ahead and adjourn the committee of the whole. Thank you very much.
Thank you.